more than 25 years of experiencing people and their interactions, you became a leadership and organizational advisor. And what I personally
More than
find
25 years
extremely
of
interesting
experiencing
is the fact
people
that you
and their
connect high
interactions,
performance and
you
quality
became a
with
leadership
elements
and
of resilience and psychological safety. So, a real human centered approach. Tricia, I'm so happy you spent your time with us today. And now we are more than curious to learn from you. So, stage is yours. Oh, you're muted.
Starting off strong. It's 12. It's almost 1 a.m. in the morning here. So, you got to bear with me. Bear with me. Thank you for having me. I wanted to jump into the networking event too, because I was like, "Ooh, I'm here early. I can come." But we're getting all set and situated. So let me share my screen and we'll get started for this morning. PowerPoint. And if
Woo!
I've got to swap my display, let me know. Okay. Someone give me is it on the right one?
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So let's get started. My name is Tricia Broderick. I my background in some ways is maybe a little bit traditional. I don't know. I have a computer science degree from Michigan State University, and I got pulled into project management and team leadership, and I was like, I will not lose my tech cred. But then my love of a check mark came out, my need for organization, my need, and I've always been people centric, and I'm an extreme extrovert. COVID almost like just hurt my soul on levels that was very difficult for me. But and then recently I co-authored a book with Diana Larson called Lead Without Blame, and it really was an alignment of seeing so many leaders struggle, so many leaders get frustrated and wonder why this magical, agile self-organization and high performance wasn't just magically happening on their teams. And and often I don't know if we always do the best job helping leaders understand how to lead knowledge workers, how to lead people in discovering value. And so this has become kind of my center because it was a rough road for me and learning what it meant to be that style of a leader. So I hopefully you can join me today, and I'm excited to hear your questions at the end as well. Okay. So let's imagine maybe as I'm thinking about things, right? Like imagine the fact of like you think your teams are starting to work together, but they keep stalling. Like something's just holding them back, or you make a little bit of progress, but then they slip backwards. Or even selfishly as a leader, I would like to take a vacation day. I would like to not be the one that answers every single question. I would like to not be trying to run around and feel like my head is cut off, trying to make sure no balls are dropping in my team and just struggling. There's just something that feels missing. And at the end of the day, I always center myself back to what I'm trying to do as a leader. And at the end of the day, leadership is about helping people discover lasting value. Okay. I know it's tempting sometimes to kind of go, it's to get things done. But how we get things done is people. How we get things done is that it can continue and scale and discover as we're going on, not just the short term, but the long term and what that means. And so I found that a lot of people could get behind this definition, could get behind the concept of leadership is about helping people discover lasting value, but we kept still throwing around terms that we weren't really all aligned with. And so even if we had this same definition and trying to understand the puzzle pieces that come together for this definition, we have to make sure that we understand what it means when we say the word team. So I'm from Michigan and the state of United States of America, and we have a American football team called the Detroit Lions. And you can call them a team all day long, but they are not a team. Like it's just not, it's not good. It's not good in any sort of way. And I'm watching organizational leaders walk around and calling people a team when they might not be that. And so let's align with this and what I mean by this. So when you first form people together, they are still individuals. I'm worried about I have my own strengths, my own weaknesses. Will I do a good job? Will I not do a good job? Will I like what I'm doing? Will I like who I'm doing it with? We're kind of worried about us first. That doesn't make you a selfish person. It makes you a human. And it makes you reality of what, when you first form people together, they are coming together as individuals. Leaders have to help them start learning how to cooperate. And I want you to think of cooperation as like a relay race. There are 4 parts to a relay race. They all win or lose together officially, but there are 4 distinct parts to a relay race. The first person hands off to the second person, that hands off to the third person, that hands off to the fourth person. And if that third person falls down, nobody blames the anchor for losing the race. They can get up afterwards and be like, we win or lose together. But everybody knows their individual split times. Everybody knows who did a good job, who didn't, because they have distinct parts. They're helping, they're coordinating, they're cooperating together towards a goal, but they've got each parts that they own. If I have task-based work, if I have things that are already known, a group can be high performing. A group can be effective. It can be really like, you do this part, you do this part, I'll coordinate a few things and it will magically all get us results. But the minute we have knowledge work, the minute we have to discover that value, the minute we live in the world of software, we need at least a team. Because a team moves from cooperating to collaborating. And here's how that sounds different. Cooperation is my part, your part. Collaboration is our part. Let's build this together. It seems so minor because you're both working in both of these. But when you feel more of a sense of ownership, when we're building something together, this is collaboration is what starts to unlock some new creativity. It starts to unlock new innovation, new quality. It helps us to want to be engaged together when we're building it because it's ours. It's our part. It's not yours versus mine. And so when we have knowledge work, we need to get at least to this team state. And unfortunately, so many that I work with are still cooperating, not collaborating. We treat those two terms as if they're the same, and then we wonder why we're not getting some of the results. Now, I wish I could tell you there's a magical single checklist. My love of a checklist wants there to be a single checklist to move from individuals to group to team. But humans, we will jack anything up. and we are so different, even in the same organization. And so one of the things that we really highlight and talk about, Diane and I do, is what are some essential motivators that are necessary to helping us get towards team, to moving from that cooperation to collaboration. And there's no order for these puzzle pieces. There's no you have to do one versus the other first, but they all fit together to help start forming the right environment to help people collaborate over cooperating. So the first one that we talk about is purpose. Now, I'm one of those individuals that I'll sometimes look at people's purpose statements, whether they're vision or mission statements or sprint goals. And sometimes I read them and I just read them and they have a sense of like, do stuff, be professional, work. And maybe that's meaningful and motivating to some individuals, but to me, it is not. Like, I know I have built a lot of software that was never used by the client. My name is Tricia Broderick. I have built code that has sat on shelves, right? I remember staying up till 2 a.m. once building a banking app to meet the deadline to deliver it, only for the client to go, nah, we don't want it. It was devastating. It was frustrating because I wrote code to solve problems. That was my purpose, was to solve problems. And somewhere along the line, purposes for teams become just show up for work, do stuff, do your task, and get done. And that's not motivating. It's not meaningful. It's not inspiring creativity and innovation and a desire to work together with people in a way that really unlocks that discovery. So I start thinking about my purpose and I start asking kind of, is one existing? Now, when I say, is it existing in the team? At a base level, is it existing? Is there a shared purpose amongst your team? Because if it is not, chances are they're going to stay individuals. Because if they don't have a shared purpose, there's no reason to cooperate, let alone collaborate. Is that shared purpose meaningful? Is it something that's inspiring and motivating? Is it superordinate? Does it actually require multiple people to work on it together? Again, moving from that cooperation into that collaboration. It is one of those things that people as humans, we want to be involved in something that is bigger than ourselves. We want to feel like we're making a difference, that we're achieving something. And so when that purpose is superordinate, it's meaningful, it's shared, it's known, it can really unite people to wanting to do collaboration. It can really unite people into wanting to come together, to discover, and to learn. And when I've seen this the most is when it isn't just known up front, but it's reinforced over and over and over again. When purpose isn't just something we write down on a vision or a mission statement and then forget about it or hang it on a wall and walk away. But when it is truly driving our decisions, when it's truly driving our behaviors and our engagement in the project and in the team. So that's one essential motivator. The second essential motivator that I want to talk about, and there are three, is co-intelligence. Now, a lot of people will use Daniel Pink's work or David Marquet's work where they talk about mastery or competence. Diane and I really talked about this concept of leveling it up when it comes to a team. So mastery and competence is really a motivating factor for an individual, for a person. But when we talk about trying to move from cooperation to collaboration, if I'm only focused on my mastery, I don't really care if I'm collaborating with you. I don't really care if I'm working together with you, because if I can still increase my skill set, my growth, my knowledge, then I'm good. And so when we start talking about moving from team or moving towards team, we really start wanting to think about using co-intelligence and increasing the co-intelligence to increase as a motivator for moving from group to team. And here's what I mean by co-intelligence. I have a set of skills, knowledge, abilities. You have a set of skills, knowledge, ability. Co-intelligent isn't just us summing those together. It's not just that, oh, I can do this skill and you can do that skill, so now together we can do two skills. Yes, there's a part of that, but it also is the combination of the two of us. It's the combination of my knowledge and abilities, your knowledge abilities, and what new things that can unlock that neither one of us individually have without the other one. And in some ways, I keep getting surprised by how much that can happen, like the power of diversity when we truly are inclusive with it in a way that we're building co-intelligence. When Diana and I were writing this book, she has a set of experiences, I have a set of experiences, but while we were writing, we ended up finding so many new areas that neither one of us would have put on our resume. Neither one of us would have highlighted as a skill, but our collaboration together was unlocking a whole new level of intelligence, a whole new level of insights, a whole new level of possibilities. And when we talk about discovering value, that's what we want. We want to be tapping in and to that true what and I'm going to blank on his last name, James. Somebody knows, I can put it in the chat. It's early. I'm blanking on his last name. Said in terms of wisdom of the crowd, right? Co-intelligence is truly tapping into the benefits and the value of wisdom of the crowd, which is what we talk about all the time in the Agile community. But we have to be intentional about building this in co-intelligence. We can't just hope it's going to happen. As leaders, we have to be thinking about what are we doing that's bringing people together so that they see, experience, and appreciate the value that they are getting from co-intelligence. And then the third thing is autonomy. Now, let me be clear. As a leader, you had to be the hub to get them to team. You had to be that center point that made sure everything was happening when they were a group. You had to make sure no balls were dropping. You had to make sure everything was locked and loaded. You were following up. You were checking in. You were trust but verifying, right? Like you were doing it all. And you had to because they weren't working together. But as they start collaborating, are you increasing the autonomy? Now, it is not enough to just go, you're empowered, so be it. That's the equivalent of saying you're a team, so be it. It doesn't work. That's the same as anybody ever tell you to calm down when you needed to calm down? It's not effective. It's not helpful. It doesn't work, right? And so telling people they're empowered, honestly, usually just feels like you're aiming a bus at them. It doesn't really feel like empowerment. And one of the ways that we work on autonomy is by increasingly becoming less of the hub, by increasingly thinking about what decisions can that person and that team start making as they're moving forward. And this is hard. This is hard for so many people because it doesn't feel like you're just trying to give up control, right? There's a reason you're doing it. I remember working with a lead QA person, and every release, this was like in the early 2000s, and every release, he was like, I have to be the person to do the release. And I'm like, well, you're a single point of failure. You're a bottleneck on the team. This is not good. We need to increase the autonomy in the team intentionally and helping other people start building it. And every release, something would happen that was totally justifying the fact that he would take over and finish the release and do it himself. And we'd have this conversation. We were doing Scrum at the time, and we'd have this conversation every sprint. You cannot be the bottleneck. You cannot be the hub. We have to increase autonomy in the team. We have to increase this. And every sprint, there would be something that would happen that would make this person take over, do it. And I was getting super frustrated because I at that time was just trying to go, stop taking away other people's autonomy. Like that was going to be effective, right? And and then like the universe spoke to me and in a weird way, and this person did not wake up for their alarm. They did not set 3 alarms. They did not have their husband stay up late to make sure that they did not sleep through a 1 a.m. session. And he did not show up for work. And I looked at the rest of the team and I said, do we have rollback abilities if this release doesn't go well? And they're like, yes. I was like, what is your confidence level? And they're like, a 6 out of 10. And I'm like, sounds good. Let's try it, right? Like, let's try. And it was painful. It was so painful, but they did it. And it took like 3 times as long. It was, I mean, when I say it was painful, but they did it. And then the interesting dynamic was when they came back, they actually asked for him to not be present at the next release because they wanted to get better. They wanted to keep increasing their autonomy. Now, some of you might be going, well, isn't that sad for that person? Now that person's not valuable anymore. No, that person now got to work on things that they had on their backlog forever. They finally got to focus on some automation and different test engineering. But it's tricky. Giving autonomy is not something you just happens. You have to be very intentional about it. You have to be very consistent about building up people's knowledge base, building up people's abilities and skills, and understanding that it's really hard when you've been the hub, when you've been that person to make sure it's happening, and walking away from that is scary. It's uncomfortable. And so take steps with it but be intentional about building autonomy in the team. So these are my 3 essential motivators. And I'm going to put this question up here. We're not doing a workshop type dynamic here for this keynote, but these are things I have to constantly think about in the team. I have to constantly be thinking about, are people able to express that purpose? I may have told them it as a leader, but can they express it? Can they share it? Is it meaningful, right? How much is the team's co-intelligence unlocking things? Are we still cooperating or are we collaborating more and more? Like, what's happening there? And then how much has the autonomy increased? I can pretend it has, but if I really stop and think about it, how much has that been happening, right? Because it's going to start with you as a leader. They're going to take the cue from you in terms of what they're able to do and where they're going to go with this. And again, this isn't an ordered thing. You don't do the purpose and then work on the co-intelligence, then do the autonomy. You might do them in different orders or at the same time or little bits as you go. But if these 3 things, these essential motivators are not present, your chances of getting them even to team level are very, very difficult. More times than not, they are staying at that group level where they're cooperating, they're willing to help each other, but they want to keep their part because my performance review is based on my part and I want to do a good job. And the hard part is Agile many of the frameworks don't start working until at least a team at a minimum. And it's one of the biggest disconnects I see in the Agile community often. So let's say you're Tricia, I've got this. My team has purpose. My team is building their co-intelligence and the autonomy is increasing. It is amazing. We are starting to really be a team and it feels like that, but I'm exhausted as the leader. I'm exhausted. I still feel like I'm the hub. Things are happening. And this is the next level of challenges that I start to work with leaders on, is I start hearing phrases that are versions of this. It's business, it's not personal. And I don't know how common this quote is in Germany, but this is a common thing US-based organizations say. And it is infuriating because there's this dynamic of, this is the quote, and they are quoting a fictional movie about the mob as a business best practice. This quote is from a fictional movie about a mob family as your business best practice. That's insanity. Humans might jack things up, but they're also what makes them awesome. And humans are personal. They have feelings, they have emotions. In fact, if you don't, I'm terrified of you. And when we go down this path where we try to make it like it's business, it's not personal, this is where blame and shame start to come in. And that nice little house you built, with your purpose and your co-intelligence and your autonomy starts breaking down, starts struggling, starts getting frustrated because people are going, wait, I want something more. There's something else. There's something next, right? And it just starts to fall apart. And then that only latches us on as a leader to be more of the hub, to be more of the dynamic of coming into the place and being frustrated by it. Oh, I was just making sure I didn't hear something. And so when we start thinking about this as leaders, I don't want this. I don't want the good work you just did to put into the house to build the foundation to start breaking down because you're not respecting people as people. And so we need to start thinking beyond those initial puzzle pieces, thinking beyond that house and going, what do we need to do to build resilient learning teams? What do we need to do to go beyond that team to the next levels? And so let me talk about what I mean by resilient learning teams and those next levels. So if you can get them to team, the only thing stopping them from becoming that next level, that high performing team, or in the agile community, often what we call a self-organizing team, and I say this with love and respect, is you, the leader. You are the game changer. If you get the team collaborating, the only thing that's stopping them from helping them to become self-organizing is you learning how to not be that hub. How do you learning how to continue to increase that autonomy, increase that co-intelligence so that you are not that center point, because this is what unlocks the scaling. This is what unlocks those next levels and those abilities. But I found something started happening, especially in 2020, where I had a lot of agile teams that were like, yeah, we're high performing, we're self-organizing. And leaders started going, well, what are we doing? Like, it feels like I don't have a job now. And I'm like, none of these things made any sense to me in the sense that leaders always, like, people hear the word self-organizing and they're like, we don't need leaders, we're self-organizing. I'm like, oh, you can't get to self-organizing without a leader. It doesn't magically just happen. That said, how the leader's interacting with the team changes with a self-organizing team. But there's still things that the leader is doing. There's still things that the leader is engaging with. And so I was struggling with this concept where people were going, well, my team's self-organizing, I don't have anything to do. And then in 2020, watching so many teams regress, so many teams that felt like that they were self-organizing, and then 2020 hits and it's as if they're barely individuals anymore, right? And they're falling back and regressing. And I realized that it's because we're not talking about what really needs to be true in that self-organizing team, and that we're building a resilient learning team. That this isn't a great, you're self-organizing, check, you're done, we're done as leaders. No. You have to keep building their resilience. You have to keep building that learning factor. You have to keep building their co-intelligence and their abilities together. And when Diane and I started thinking about what are the things that quote of "it's business, it's not personal" makes us avoid. What are the topics that as leaders, as teams, we like right under the surface? They're there, but we ignore them and hope that they just go away. That prevent us from building our resiliency, that prevent us from continuing to learn. And so we came up with 4 of them. So the first one that I want to talk about is building connections. We call it collaborative connections. And this goes back to it's personal. You can't get on a Zoom or on WebEx with somebody once without any video, without anything, just talk to somebody once a month and then go, we're collaborating. Like that's not going to work. That's not going to be effective with things. And so as leaders, what are you doing that's tuning these interactions, even in a remote world, even in a virtual world, even in a hybrid world? We had the benefit when we were in person that you would get some of the natural connections happening at the water cooler or at lunch breaks. But how are you being intentional about tuning these interactions? How are you building the trust and the respect within the people in the team. And this isn't, again, going, oh, everybody trusts each other, check, done, I never have to talk about it. No, you have to constantly do it. And there's endless list of ways to do it. And again, no one way is going to work for every team and every situation. One of my favorite ways, and I want to give each, with each one of these, I want to give you a tactical tip with them as well. One of my favorite techniques is from CR Global's Coaching Institute, where they talk about the appreciation loop. And essentially what this is, I'm going to actually explain what it is as I explain what I had my teenagers do. I have teenagers. I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. And I sat them down. I had them face each other. And I said, here's what you are going to do. You are going to, one person is going to give an appreciation to the other person. And then you are going to say just thank you. And then you are going to give an appreciation back to the other person. And you're going to keep rotating and doing a loop until I tell you to stop. Now, I did not choose to do this technique right after a massive fight that they just had. No. I just did this on a random day and they were like, oh no, mom is conference Tricia mode, right? Like, what is she testing out on us? And they sat down and they started doing it. And at first, I mean, these are teenagers. At first it was like, I like that you don't bug me. And then it was like, I like that you are my sister. And it was just so surface and so like ridiculous, right? And in my head, I'm like, this is horrible. This is not working, right? But because it's a loop, they kept going. And eventually what started happening was, one said, I like that you let me play Minecraft with your friends. I like that you laugh at my jokes, and it just kept, and now all of a sudden I, as the parent, I'm in the corner of the room crying. I'm like, oh, they love each other. Like, and just so excited. Now I'm not recommending that part. Like, you shouldn't be trying to get your teammates on your team to love each other. Okay. But like in my mind, for my teenagers, that was an appropriate reaction. But are we taking time to lift people up in our teams? Are we taking times to appreciate each other? Are we taking that effort and creating space for that? I know we don't have time, Tricia. We got to get work done. You don't have time not to, because they're the people that do the work. And if they're not able to build trusting relationships, if they're in connections, if they're not able to collaborate, you don't get the work done anyways. So you need to take this time to tune those connections to help keep building together as you're going forward with it. The second one that I want to talk about is embracing conflict. I love conflict. I do. I own it. I love conflict. I hate drama. They are not the same thing. Drama is what most people think of and are afraid of with conflict, like the personal attacks, the blaming, the feels like war, like the frustrations and yelling. That's drama. Conflict is just a problem to solve. But we have to keep conflict at those healthy levels. We have to keep de-escalating conflict. Otherwise, it becomes a bigger issue. And so many people avoid conflict at all costs. And that's the scariest one to me, because I, as a person who loves conflict, I am passionate, I am loud, I'm engaged in a discussion. And people will sometimes like, ooh, it's scary, it's intimidating. Oh no, what if she's going to get too mad? That's not when you should be afraid of me, is when I'm engaged. When I go silent, you should run. When I stop talking, when I no longer can trust what is here to here, that I stonewall, that I go to avoidance, that I'm no longer willing to de-escalate, run as fast and as far away from me as possible. And yet it is incredibly amazing to me how many times I've gotten to that point and somebody else on the team will walk up to me like, oh, wasn't that great? You didn't say anything. You were fine. And I'm like, no, I was not fine. But we think of the absence of conflict as good. That is not good. If I want co-intelligence, that means I I have differences than you, which is going to cause conflict. No conflict means we're not speaking. No conflict means we're not building anything. No conflict means we're probably working as individuals or group. But do we know how to de-escalate conflict? Do we know how to keep it as a problem to solve versus getting to those places where it starts to turn into drama? And that is not healthy for anybody. But conflict, are we helping teams embrace it and know how to de-escalate it back to a problem to solve? Third one is power dynamics. Hi, my name is Tricia Broderick, and I tried saying things like this as an executive. Just consider me one of the team. Just consider, don't worry about my title. I'm just one of the team. No, I'm not. I'm an executive with power dynamics that influences people in different ways, both positively and potentially negatively. And if I don't acknowledge that, if I don't recognize that, respect that, I'm just adding to the impact of it. Power dynamics always exist in organizations. They can look like the formal power that people most think of, like who reports to who, but they could also be influential power. Influential power is based on who's respected in an organization. One of the things that I love doing when I'm trying to deal with power dynamics is trying to balance the engagement. And I had a lead developer approach me once, and he's like, "I want off this team, Tricia. I want to go into mobile development." And I was like, "Well, okay, so let's move you out of mobile." "Well, I can't. If I'm not on this team, it falls apart." And I'm like, "Oh, well, let me watch you in the next meeting that you're in." And I did. And this lead developer was the first to speak, the second to speak, the fourth to speak, the fifth to speak, the seventh to speak, right? Like he was just constantly speaking. And so I said, "Okay, let's have a little challenge. If you can do this challenge, I will buy your happy hour drinks. If you cannot, you will buy mine. And I'm an expensive tequila drinker. So challenge is difficult, okay?" And he's like, "Got it." I said, "Here's your challenge. You can't speak before 3 people speak because you are a lead developer. Yes, you're in Scrum. Technically, there are no titles in Scrum, but you are a lead developer that has been with the company for a number of years, highly respected. You have a ton of influential power. You could probably say the sky is purple and people are like, okay, like because they respect your knowledge. It's not out of a fear. It's not out of a negative. They respect you. So you can't speak until 3 people speak." And the facilitator of the next meeting asked a question. And I am not kidding you. Everybody turned and stared at this lead developer, waiting for him to talk. And I'm holding up in the back of the room like 0, like, ha ha ha, I'm gonna get my happy hour. and he doesn't speak. He's shifting in his seat. It's so uncomfortable. And I'm talking 5 minutes goes by and people are still just staring at him. It is horrible. And finally somebody speaks so hesitantly and everybody turns and stares at him again. And he's like, "Ugh." And I'm like, "1, you can't talk till 3, right?" And finally people start talking. It starts finally going. And after the third person, I mean, I'm not even sure the third person finished their full sentence. Like he just blurts out, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." At this point, he has been sweating, shifting in his seat. He's miserable, right? And he blurts out, "I'm so sorry." Because what he didn't understand is in his quest to be efficient, in his quest to be super effective, he had not balanced the engagement in the room. He had not acknowledged his power dynamic of influential power and helped to balance the room. And so he created a habit where everybody became dependent on him out of respect, not even out of fear. When you hold a position of power, it is up to you to balance that engagement. It's up to you to diminish some of that effect. And you can't just diminish it of like, just ignore me. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. What are you doing to give space for other people? What are you doing to lift other people up? How are you balancing the engagement a little bit? And then the last one that I want to cover and talk about is workplace microaggressions. We call this inclusive collaboration. And I know that for a lot of people, this is still a taboo topic in the workplace, but I'm not having that anymore. Nope, I'm done with that argument. And here's the reality. Let me highlight first what a microaggression is. Microaggression is something that is typically rooted in very good intent, but delivered in a way that is harmful and negatively impactful to somebody else. And it can be based from a bias, unconscious or conscious. It can be based on stereotypes. It can be based on many different things. But for a long time, I was taught that you don't address any kind of microaggressions in the workplace, that you don't talk about these taboo topics, that it's separated. But if I'm going to talk about the power of co-intelligence and collaboration and the power that comes from diversity, the only way you get the power of diversity is to create inclusive environments, which means addressing workplace microaggressions. It's not easy. It's not light, but it's necessary. And one of my moments, I had many moments that came to this realization, but I want to give one that's personal to me. I was at an Agile conference. This was pre-COVID, and I was walking down a hallway, and Tricia is not a name that a ton of people have. And I hear my name as I'm turning a corner. I don't do the most grown-up thing and keep turning the corner to see who's talking about me. I stop for a second and I listen. Don't judge me. That's the reality of what happened. So I'm listening to a conversation about me that they have no idea that I'm listening to, right? Again, don't you judge me. I got it, but it's the reality, okay? And in this conversation, I hear the words, "Is Tricia the token female in your company?" Because I was the only female agilist in the group. And this is not the first time I have heard this question in my career. I have been asked if I'm the token executive. I've been asked if I'm the token developer. I've been asked if I'm right? Like, this is not the first time as a female in the tech industry that I have heard this question. And honestly, most people ask me it directly half the time. But this time they asked it to somebody else, and my colleague responded with the most amazing, wonderfully complimenting remarks. Honestly, to the point that I was like, I don't even agree with that statement. But he was so wonderful, and he was complimenting me, and he was highlighting, and he was basically highlighting how amazing I was. And I standing there, and I realized in that moment, for the first time, I was mad at my colleague. I'm like, wow, he's saying all these wonderful things. Why am I mad at him? And I was mad when I thought about it, when I dissected it, I was mad because although he was defending me, he never called out the inappropriate question to begin with. He never called out the microaggression in the first place. He leaves that is a burden I still carry, that is a question that some people think is acceptable to ask. By complimenting me and not addressing the workplace microaggression, I was mad because it continues that trend. It continues that pattern in the workplace. And honestly, I'm just tired. I'm tired of it. I don't know what I need to do. I don't know how many keynotes, books. What do I need to do to stop being asked if I'm the token female? I'm tired. But I'm actually more tired at this point that only what feels like at times women are saying that we're tired. And I'm using this personal example. There's tons of microaggressions and tons of things. People that are experiencing the microaggressions are exhausted. We need other people addressing them. We need this to stop in those regards. And I don't say stop in a way that I want judgment and blaming of people. I want learning. I want us growing. I want us to realize and understand why that microaggression is hurtful and impactful in negative ways so that we stop asking it. I don't want you to be humiliated. I don't want you to be canceled. I want you to learn. But it takes multiple people starting to address workplace microaggressions for us to really have inclusive collaborations. So those are the 4 resilient factors that leaders are constantly working on. It isn't just getting them collaborating and your job is done. No, 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 no. Your job is continuing, and you've got to be constantly dealing with these things, because if you're not, they are lingering under that team. And the minute COVID hits, the minute murder hornets hit, the minute the next chaotic, crazy thing in this world hits, your team will regress because they don't have the resilience and the learning together to withstand whatever chaos is coming their way. So I have this image here to kind of summarize the essential motivators and the resilience factors. We're at time already, so I want to thank you and open it up for questions. And I think I just need to stop sharing my screen now so I can hear and see the questions, right? Okay.
Thanks, Tricia. Yes,
Oh.
thanks a lot. I see a lot of applause that we can't hear in this setting, unfortunately. Yeah, we would jump right into the questions actually, because there are quite some that were pushed to Slido or magically were transferred from the chat to Slido. There's one organizational one I will shortly answer. There was a question for a break. Yes, we will take a break at 10:15 for 15 minutes, just as a service announcement, basically. So let's start with the top voted question. What would you advise to teams and coaches if you discover sub-teams within a team?
Well, first, I don't know if it's a problem. If your team is so big that you can't collaborate, you can't get shared ownership, I often recommend sub-teams or splitting things down. What I want to make sure is those sub-teams have a meaningful purpose, though. It can't just be a section of the architecture or just do the tasks and you don't need to know why you're doing them. Like, you want to make sure your sub-teams, whether I always call my sub-teams ranger teams. I don't know why it can't, but it sticks. So I keep almost saying it. So I'm just going to acknowledge it, right? But whatever you call your sub-teams, you want to make sure that they have a clear, shared, meaningful purpose. And it's not just they're the database part of the team, because that gets really tricky then to deliver that discovery of that value in those areas. But I don't necessarily know if it's a problem. Now, if it's a problem because you're doing handoffs and you're now doing relay between those 4 teams, now you've got so really you don't have 4 teams, you have 4 groups. And that can increase your problems. But again, that can apply whether you have 1 team or you have 4 teams and a sub-team.
Thank you. I have another one. I experienced that many leaders don't believe in purpose and its importance. For a team, of course, they are IT people as the others. What approach do you suggest?
So I always struggle with this because I've been in leadership meetings, and I promise you, I'm a betting woman. In fact, I leave for Vegas tomorrow, okay? But I have never sat in a senior leadership meeting and where we went, how do we make everybody miserable today? I have never sat in a senior leadership meeting where we went, how do we make everybody dysfunctional today? And so a lot of times one of those things is they're making decisions that they don't understand the full impact, or we're not always communicating the full impact because of power dynamics or things like that. And so if I find that I have a leadership team that doesn't seem to believe in the purpose a little bit and has that kind of just be a professional and do your job. Well, you also didn't you say you hire the best people? Oh, you hire the best people? Don't you want to get the best out of us? Awesome. So in order to get the best part of us, here's multiple research studies, Daniel Pink's, David Marquez, Like there's so many out there that highlight purpose is a motivating factor for knowledge workers. It is different than task workers. And if we don't start tapping into that, engagement is the number one determiner of whether something's going to be successful or not. We have to tap into that. So I guess I challenge individuals of what you can control is how you react and what you are going to be transparent about and how you are going to approach that subject back and having those conversations, as difficult as they are. But I know as a senior leader myself, I am grateful every time, maybe not right in the moment, but every time I get a gut punch of somebody going, have you considered? And I'm like, oh, thank you for saying it to me, because until you did, I didn't see that, right? And it's hard to feel the pain sometimes. And so, but are we sharing the pain? And I guess that's without any more context, that's my 2 cents I can offer right now.
Thanks. Another question. How do you encourage people going steps towards this autonomy? How to remove concerns and fear?
So one of the things that I love doing with a new team is asking them if they want to be a team. We make the assumption people want high performance, but we don't often even ask. We don't often explain what it means. We don't often uncover those fears and those issues. And I did it the very first time I ever did it, and I laid out the various, here's what individuals mean, here's what group means, here's what team means, here's what self, and I asked them to stand along this evolution of where they feel like they would do the best job. And I stupidly thought everybody was going to go stand in high performance because clearly this is the answer. And no, they didn't. There was across the board. And I was like, oh, we have to talk about it. We have to actually engage about this. And what I learned was there are some people that their performance reviews influence them to act as an individual. There are some individuals that had a really bad experience working in a team and have some triggering dynamics related to it. And because nobody talks about those ones, they're not willing to engage. It's kind of like we punish people to step up. We are giving you autonomy. Well, they've stepped up in the past and they got smacked down. How many times do you want them to step up and get smacked down before they've learned to not step up? And so if I need to break those, I have to acknowledge and honor those experiences. I have to recognize that that's a reality. I worked with a team once where they had a leader, and I use that term loosely, that just totally vetoed every one of their decisions, every single opportunity he got. And so I come into the picture and I'm like, why are you not? They're like, nope, we know this game. We're not playing this game. You're just going to veto. And I'm like, I'm not going to veto. It took me several decisions before I started breaking that association that leaders just veto something. And so I wish I could give you this magical checklist, but I do recommend that you look at psychological safety models like safety or David Rock's SCARF, because it gives you some tangible things that may need to be in place for people to start increasing their trust.
Amazing. So the next question is, in teams, one often sees a reduction in emotional range and expression, especially in remote work. How can we give more space and time to feelings and needs?
Well, if you figure that out magically all in one answer, could you please let me know and I'll write a second book and add it to it. This is hard because every person's emotional needs are different. Emotional intelligence and social intelligence is not a skill that you just learn overnight. But here's the answer I'm going to give. Here's what's coming to me at 2 a.m. in the morning is how much are you role modeling it as the leader? I've cried in front of my teams. I have no shame about that. I'll cry again. I'll share an emotional story. I'll share a vulnerable story. Or if you're not being emotional ever, why would your teams? If you're not highlighting that that's valuable and helping to set that environment, set that tone. Now, I'm not saying you should show up and sob like a baby and talk about your marriage. Like, no, that's not appropriate. Okay. I'm saying being your authentic self that comes with emotion. And that emotion has a scale and a range and honoring that. And so I guess my quick answer without additional context is role model it. Start it with you.
Thanks for the input. Another question, I think it's a bit in the same direction probably. What about trust and knowing each other? It seems essential to me, especially in virtual teams. That's a similar thing, I guess.
Yeah, so I am going to piggyback off my last statement and demonstrate showing vulnerability. So when I talk about connections, I'm very careful about fake surface connections, meaning you're not building connections by sharing your favorite color. I don't care what your favorite color is. Don't care. It is not going to make me collaborate any more with you, any better with you if we share the same favorite color. Don't do these lazy surface level connection crap. Okay. And in addition to it being surface, also you do have to be careful about those kind of activities like fast friend activities where you don't know what is going to happen for somebody. So for example, if you ask a icebreaker type question that's like, dead or alive, who would be the person that you would want to have dinner with? And the answer that most people are expecting is something like, I don't know, I don't even want to say his name right. Like Rosa Parks, right? Or something like they're expecting some like inspirational answer that everybody's like, oh yeah, or someone else is like Prince, right? Like they're expecting these kind of not fun, but maybe fun answers. But if you ask me that question and I'm being authentic to me, my answer is my child that is deceased. If I answer that question, I have just killed the entire mood of the whole exercise. And I know that. So then I go, well, I don't want to answer that way. So I'm going to lie and I'll say this. But then I go home that night and I'm devastated because I didn't honor my son. I didn't honor that truth for me. I wasn't inclusive and authentic to who I was. So a lot of times these surface level things in the workplace, you don't know what kind of traumas, what kind of triggers you might be creating. So for me, when I'm building connections, I want to focus on building connections and trust that is based on co-intelligence, that's based on working together. Give people something to work on together. You will build trust. You can build connections and knowledge of each other without like faking these whole, like, what's your favorite movie? Like, I don't care. I don't care. And in fact, you're probably just going to mock me for my favorite movie. And then I'm going to like, I have less trust in you. Right. So I mean, really think about it. Think about the teams where you were in the trenches with somebody. You were like working late. You were busting together. You were in it together. There are bonds that you do not lose from those teams, right? And it doesn't mean it has no conflict, but there are bonds that are formed from just the collaboration. I say lean into that than any of those surface level trustful activities. Like I'm not down for those.
Love it. Thank you. The next one is, how are you addressing microaggression if you are the newbie and still on probationary time?
Well, let me and I don't think I said this earlier, and I should have said this just to be clear. Get training on microaggressions. Get formal training on what they are, what they mean, and how to respond to them, especially in a professional setting. Because one of the responses to them is you don't respond. It may not be safe for you to respond. It may not be safe for you personally or professionally. Not every microaggression in that moment needs a response. And it may not be necessary, or it may not be okay in that moment to respond to it. And so this is one of those things that I had to learn is like, what are the factors and things that I have to take into consideration to decide how I want to respond and when I want to respond. And so I highly recommend looking into some training along those lines. There's some great resources out there, and a variety of them. But if you're on probation and it doesn't feel safe for you to respond to a microaggression workspace or microaggression workplace statement, then maybe you don't in that moment. And you escalate it to HR, or you enlist somebody else that can be an ally or something along those lines. And it may not be safe for you to engage. I hope that it is. I would hope that for me as a leader, that would be like, yes, you are definitely on this team, right? But I can understand the fear.
Okay, thanks. Looking at the clock, we are running out of the time box actually, but Tricia, question to you. We have some questions still for you. Do you have time for one or two more?
I will. Sure, I'll stick around.
Okay. Next question. In my observation, colleagues want to avoid conflicts because they seem to have a wrong understanding of them. How to get healthy conflicts?
Yeah, I have to do a lot of training in my teams about what conflict means and what drama means. There's a book called the Drama Triangle, and I can't think of the author names right now, are escaping me at 2 a.m. So you cannot, please do not judge me for that. But the Drama Triangle is a concept that I do a lot of teaching of my teams with, so that we can recognize the real reaction and fears to drama and disassociate it from conflict. And understanding that avoiding conflict actually leads to the very thing that they don't want to happen. And so I try to normalize conflict a little bit in that regard, but also acknowledge, like, anybody ever try to avoid a conflict? Usually bites them. And it bites them hard later. It comes back worse. Like, I am more afraid of the consequences of unaddressed conflict than I am of conflict. And so I do a lot of training on that, and really having discussions about that usually lead into our team charters or our working agreements as we're going forward. But I don't make the assumption people just understand it. So one time I did a book club on the Drama Triangle because it was so bad. And then that led to us understanding and moving forward with it.
Thank you. New members in existing virtual team. It is hard for newcomers how to break through. So this is a group versus high-performing team.
Oh, yes. So you cannot approach and call yourself a high-performing team if you expect people to assimilate. This is not. So when you get a new team member, you are no longer a high-performing team. You actually go back to individuals, because it starts from the lowest feeling in the team. Now, it may not take you as long to get back to high performance as it did the first time, but you want to honor that new team member. When you try to just go, here's what we're doing, just jump on board, you're assimilating and you're not really building new co-intelligence with that individual. And so I try to set an expectation that new team members means we restart in the evolution, and we have to be intentional about moving forward because we have a new set of co-intelligence now. It also takes the pressure off the new person to assimilate or to break through, and that's just not fair to any new person.
Okay, I would say let's do 2 more questions, if
Okay.
that is okay. Next one would be, what if you recognize a conflict, but no one is really talking about it? So team seems good, but still you recognize there is a conflict no one is talking about.
Yeah, this is a double-edged sword. Because if you see a conflict and they're not ready to recognize or acknowledge the conflict, the chances of you addressing the conflict are very slim because they're gonna avoid it, they're gonna ignore it, and things like that. So often, what I try to do, and I might be wrong. I might see something that isn't there. For me, it might be a conflict, but for them, it might genuinely be fine. So I do a couple things. One, I think about what could I be teaching my team that might help them through this if that conflict is really there. So I might teach them about like Christopher Avery's responsibility process, or I might teach them if I think the conflict's about blaming and not really taking responsibility. I might teach them about the drama triangle, right? Like, so in my head, I'm not trying to solve the conflict because may not be a conflict, right? But also I'm thinking, if this does go down a bad path, if I am right, what knowledge or ability might help the team work through it? Again, I'm leading to that resiliency, right? I'm thinking about that dynamic and the learning factors with it. 2, if that's not enough and it is something that needs to get addressed, is there is some problem that they are willing to acknowledge that you could probably tie that conflict together with. So let me think if I can think of an example offhand. So let's say I am seeing handoffs in the team and they're kind of finger pointing, right? Like they're not really collaborating, they're cooperating, right? Now I can come in and be like, you're not collaborating, and they're gonna go one ear out the other, okay? I could come at it and going, well, we just need to stop with the handoffs and be more collaborative. Nope, isn't probably gonna telling people things isn't gonna work, right? But I might go, well, what are your challenges that you're frustrated by? And the team, and in the moment I'm thinking about with this, the team looked at me and they're like, we don't have enough testers. I was like, okay. Well, why is this a problem? Well, because we get to the end of our sprint and the testers can't keep up with all the work. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we're not getting things done. So you're frustrated things aren't getting done, and you see the bottleneck is testers. Okay. Well, we cannot hire more testers. So what are alternatives that we could do? Now I've tied the conflict to a problem, a purpose that they are motivated in solving. Not just here's what I see, but what do they see? What problem do they experience that they have that they want to work on? And chances are you can tie whatever you're seeing to what they're experiencing. You're just not giving them their motivating purpose without it. I don't know if that made sense, but it did in my head, but it's 2 a.m. So we'll see.
Great. Last question. Do you have any advice on how to find the purpose?
Oh, well, it's fascinating to me right now how I'm wanting to answer different questions. So on a product delivery level, this is an art and a skill that I tip my hat to people. I like when people are able to create product visions that are the purpose of a development team. I'm always astounded by the art and the craft of seeing a market and disrupting a market. And it's just not a talent that I possess. And I don't know if I have great advice on that, except the book that I would probably recommend the most for that specific, the product side of it, is called Escaping the Build Trap by Melissa Perry. On a personal front of purpose as a leader, don't know if what I do is the best for other people, but I can share what I've done and what I do work with people on is, what do I want to be known for? What do I want if people can only say one line elevator pitch about me? Do I want it to be, she's a bottleneck? Do I want it to be, she gets things done? Or do I want it to be, she makes a difference? And when I start thinking about what I want as my shining star, my North Star, my guiding thing, it actually makes a lot of other choices I make easier. But it's not always easy to find that personal purpose. But for me, I ended up learning I couldn't have a professional purpose and a personal purpose. Mine had to blend. Mine had to be one for me to be authentically myself. So I think what I would give in terms of advice in the shorthand format is think about your brand. And I don't mean it from just a marketing standpoint, but I mean it from a, what do you want? And what do you want to be known for? And then start making decisions that align to it. And your purpose will continue to become more clear.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Tricia.
Thank you for having me. This was amazing. I hope you have a wonderful continued event too.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, we hope you finally catch some sleep that night that was so short.
I'm feeling very energized and awake right now. So
oh my God. That's nice to hear. Looking at the clock, we basically skipped our